Hello Year 8, welcome back to History with Miss Warby. Today we are looking at how did Britain change? So that is your title for today. Could you please write that in your book along with the date and underline it with a ruler? In today's lesson, we want to identify the broad elements of change in England using some source analysis, and we're going to be able to assess the amount of change and continuity in England at this time. So how much change took place, but also what stayed the same. Pause the video here, and when you're ready, we will move on. Okay, first thing I'd like you to do is in your exercise book, name 5 inventions that may have revolutionised your life. So think about what you use on a day-to-day basis that is very, very important. That could be an iPad or a tablet, a PlayStation or an Xbox or some kind of games console. Your phone, please don't judge me for having a picture of a BlackBerry. I know we're a lot more modern than that these days. The internet, and perhaps a mode of transport. So 5 things that you think have revolutionised, have changed the way you live your life today. And we will move on. In your exercise book, you need to either use a double page if you have that available. Please don't waste pages. So if you're currently working on a double page, that's fine, use that. If not, just turn the page you are on sideways. So you're going to need at least one whole page for this. We're going to split it up into 3 sections with a couple of different headings. So take a look. If you're doing it on a double page, this is what it's going to look like. So you're going to have 3 rows and 4 columns. So 1750s, 1830s, 1890s, and then you need a column for land, one for transport, one for power, and one for industry. Okay, I will show you what that looks like on an A4 piece of paper. So if you're just working on one piece of paper, it will look a little bit like this. Please make sure you're using a ruler just to keep that work nice and tidy for me, please, ladies. Okay, once you have drawn that, we are going to be doing a little bit of source analysis looking at images. And the images are going to be of Britain, how it changes from 1750 to 1890. So we're going to start with looking at Britain in the 1750s, and it's a very, very busy picture. So when I show you the image, you're going to pause the video and fill out the row that focuses on 1750. So you are going to be looking at the land in this image, the transport, power, and industry. So what kind of factories they're using, things like that. As it says here, land use, transport, power, industry. If you want to do the extension, you could also consider the nice things and perhaps the not so nice things. So the advantages and disadvantages at this time. When you are ready, we will look at the picture. Okay, here we go. So this is Britain in the 1750s. Make sure you're paying close attention to the land, how it's being used, how are people getting around, what else can you identify. Pause the video here and fill out your table. Okay, lovely, moving on. Let's take a look at this then. So Britain in the 1750s, you've seen lots of farming area, several churches, small homes, and perhaps a small mine. If we go back to the image, this little area here could potentially be a mine where they are digging down into this cliff face. Again, farmlands, lots of small buildings, and you can see there is a church in the distance. That's probably a church. This is also a church, okay? Also, an interesting detail to note is to look at the graveyard just here. Keep an eye on that as we go through the images. So, where do we get to? Transport, there's horse and carts. There's a small sailboat in the back of the image. People are walking around. If you don't spot any of this, you can always go back in the video, take a little look at the image again and see if you can find what's shown on this table. Power-wise, we're seeing a water wheel, lots of manpower. That's just people moving machines and getting them to work. We saw a windmill. That was a very, very popular method of getting machinery to work. And coal power. Having a small mine nearby would make coal power a lot easier. Powerful landowner in the big house. So on the image, you'll see that there is a house that's significantly larger than the others. Could that be potentially the person who owns the land that everybody else is working on? And finally, industry. Obviously, there's lots of farming because there's lots of open land. We see some mining, potentially a pub, and maybe some small factories, but nothing like we're going to see in the next couple of images. And then again, if you want to highlight some nice things or advantages and some nasty things, disadvantages, you are free to do that. Okay, so pause the video here, fill out any gaps you may have on your table, and we will move on to 1830. So again, same instructions, have a really good look at the picture of Britain in the 1830s. There is a lot going on. Pause the video and fill in the next row down on your table. So you should have done the 1750s, now we're moving on to the 1830s. Focusing on the same topics, land use, transport, power and industry. And you can talk about the nice things and nasty things if you would like to. That is an extension, you do not have to do it. Here is our image. Okay, so let's note what is slightly different. We still have some buildings, the churches are still remaining there, the boats are getting bigger, and this land has been sectioned off a little bit more. Can you see how there's certain areas for certain things? We're seeing a different kind of machinery. Also, quite a big change is this. What is this? What is it doing? What's on the back of it? Lots of questions you can be asking. A nice smiley face on the church. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but I like it. It's an interesting little touch. What do you notice about this? It's not that different, but there is definitely a few more gravestones. So maybe population is getting a little bit bigger. Loads of things going on, not just what I've mentioned. Take a look at these. What does that tell us? Okay, and we will go through the answers in a little while. So once you've filled up that row, we're going to move swiftly on to Britain in the 1890s. So remember this image, make sure your row is complete, and then let the video play on. Okay, here we are. Same rules apply then. We are focusing on land, power, transport and industry. But this is a couple of years later. What do we notice? There is a lot less free land. We're seeing a lot more buildings come in. That train line is still there. Some new modes of transport. Lots of lights around. What does that suggest that has been developed by the late 1800s? Look at what's happened to the church. Look at these gravestones. What does that mean for the amount of people that are living here? What else do you notice there's a lot more of? One thing I think is really interesting is that we're moving from not just coal, but these massive oil containers among all of the houses. Factories, even the boats have changed. Okay, so spend a little bit of time looking at this in a lot of detail. What can you pick out? Show me how well you can analyse these sources. Okay, and then we will go through some of the answers. So pause the video here, fill out your final column on your table, and we will take a look at what we've managed to come up with. So this is what I managed to come up with. I want you to focus largely on the 1830s and 1850s roads. So in the 1830s, we saw a lot more buildings, some roads, some more factories being introduced. We saw a lot more chimneys being placed throughout the town. A lot less free space, but there are still churches. And I think this emphasises to us how important religion is at this time, because they're changing everything, but the churches are managing to stay put. Transport-wise, we're seeing bigger boats. People are still walking around and using horseback like they did in the first image, but we also see the introduction of this steam train, and this is going to be something that revolutionises industry moving forward. Power-wise, again, we're still seeing animal power. Horses are pulling carts and being used to power equipment. There's a lot more coal usage, and we see that windmills and water wheels are disappearing. And then industry, again, like we saw in the land, more factories are being created and they're significantly bigger. And a steam train looks like it's delivering some kind of resources, potentially coal. Let's compare that then with the 1890s. There's hardly any farming land. It's all seemed to have disappeared. The buildings are significantly bigger and a lot more frequent. All of the land is covered in some kind of building. And the church has got a lot bigger. And remember what I said about those gravestones? There are more of them, which potentially suggests that there are a lot more people living in that area. Some might argue that it's the amount of factories that have been introduced that means people are coming to this area so that they can find work. Transport then, as I pointed out, we saw a different type of boat. People still walking around, but I thought I had written trains twice then, but I've written trams. There was a small cart. It looked a little bit like a bus, but I'm suggesting that that might have been a tram. And then obviously the introduction of trains. Power-wise, there's a significant amount of coal, lots more machinery rather than using animal power. So we're starting to see things working by themselves, Animals are not needed as much to power the machinery that's being used. Gas lights in the street also suggest different kinds of energy as opposed to just coal. I pointed out the oil to you. That could just be one of the alternatives that they're using. And then finally, industry, full of factories, chimneys absolutely everywhere. Not much farming going on, so perhaps there's a shift from farming and agriculture over to the more industrial side of things. Think back to that video we watched last lesson when we saw the chimneys rising out of the ground and people were taking away the green area. And then finally, oil, as if I haven't mentioned it enough. So pause the video here if you need to, fill out any gaps you might have on your table, although I'm sure you have done very well in keeping up so far, ladies. And we will move on. So let's do a little bit of comparison then. We've looked at 3 different time periods, a couple before the Industrial Revolution, and then we see a lot further along in the Industrial Revolution. Could you summarise each of these years, potentially in just 10 words? How would you describe life in each of these time periods from the sources that we have used? A good sentence starter could be, in the 1750s, life in Britain seemed... ... finish the sentence. Then you might want to use a connective word, whereas in the 1830s we begin to see ... Yeah? Try and see if you can get it down to 10 words. I won't be annoyed if you go over though, that is absolutely fine. It's all about comparison. What are you noticing that's the same? What are you noticing that's different? Pause the video here and then press play when you are ready. Okay, so how did Britain change then? The question of the hour. I'd like you to answer these questions in your exercise book. You don't have to write the question out. You can if you want to. If you're not writing the question out, could you please answer in full sentences? So, number 1, describe one specific thing in the images that has changed over time. Number 2, explain what you believe changed the most over the 140 years you have seen. Describe and explain what you think caused the changes in big cities. So lots of things for you to be thinking about. This section, Bright Sparks, so this is our extension. If you fancy doing a little bit more, as I know some of you will, I'd like you to identify which changes might have given the city advantages or disadvantages. So what has changed in those images for the good, that would be advantages, and what has changed for the bad? That would be our disadvantages. Which changes have given more opportunities to people? Is there more opportunity for housing, more opportunity for work? And which changes might have exploited people or taken advantage of them? So what things might have changed that perhaps aren't very good? And remember, everything in this yellow box is just an extension, but you have to answer these 3 questions in the blue box. Okay, to finish then, you have 2 tasks to choose from. Now, task 1 is which statement do you agree with most and why? So have a read through of each of these 3 statements, and in your exercise book you could write, I agree most with statement 1 or 2 or 3 because. And the because is very important because that's you justifying your decision. It's all well and good to pick one, but the only way I will know if you haven't picked one at random is if you explain your decision. So that's task 1. Which do you agree with most? Now, if that's a little bit too easy for you and you want to really push yourself, have a look at task 2. Which statement is the most accurate and why? So here we're looking for opinion. Here we're looking for a little bit more fact. Again, read through each statement, and in your exercise book you are going to write statement 1, 2 or 3 is the most accurate because. Again, I need you to justify your opinion. Really explain to me why you believe what you have chosen. I hope that makes sense. So pause the video here, get on with your final exercise, and that is it. Can I just say very, very well done to everyone who is watching these lessons and doing the work. I'm so proud. It's a really, really difficult time, and I'm just so impressed with everyone in Year 8, how they're managing with the work and how they are coping and getting through this. Again, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, please email me. I am looking at my emails very, very regularly and aim to get back to you as quickly as possible. I will see you in the next video. Stay safe. Goodbye, Year 8.